A woman showed up with DNA proof that my husband is her son's father. She stood at my doorstep on a Tuesday morning holding a manila folder and a teenage boy who looked exactly like my husband had in our wedding photos from 20 years ago. I'm not here for money, she said quickly, seeing my face drain of color. But Alexander deserves to know his father, and your husband needs to know the truth about what happened that night. My legs nearly gave out as I stared at this boy who had my husband Robert's distinctive green eyes, his exact nose, even the way he nervously rubbed his neck when uncomfortable. The DNA test results she handed me showed 99.97% probability of paternity. The letterhead was from a legitimate laboratory, the kind used in court cases. That's impossible, I whispered, my mind racing through calculations. Robert and I have been together since college. He's never cheated, never even had a bachelor party. When could this have happened? The woman, Grace, looked confused, then sympathetic. The conception date was October 15th, 2008. Robert told me you two had an open relationship back then. He said you were taking a break during graduate school. My world tilted sideways. October 2008 was when Robert had his severe motorcycle accident, spending 3 weeks in a coma with traumatic brain injury. I'd lived at the hospital, praying he'd wake up, holding his hand through the worst period of our lives. There was absolutely no way he'd fathered a child then. He was in a coma, I said flatly, showing her photos from that time on my phone. Robert unconscious, connected to machines, fighting for his life. From October 1st through October 22nd, whatever happened, whoever you were with, it wasn't my husband. Grace's face went pale as she studied the hospital photos, comparing dates on medical charts to her own records. But the DNA test, she said weakly, and he looks exactly like the man I remember. The motorcycle, the leather jacket, even the tattoo on his shoulder. That's when the impossible truth started forming in my mind. Robert had an identical twin brother, Ryan, who disappeared from our lives years ago after a massive fight about money Robert had loaned him. Ryan, who rode the same model motorcycle, who'd gotten matching tattoos with Robert on their 18th birthday, who'd always been jealous of Robert's stable relationship with me. I called Robert at work, telling him to come home immediately. While we waited, Grace told me about that October night. She'd met a man at a hotel bar who said he was in town for his brother's wedding, claiming his name was Robert Thompson. He'd been charming, slightly drunk, talking about his complicated relationship with his girlfriend, who was supposedly taking space to focus on her PhD. They'd had one night together before he vanished. Robert arrived home to find his teenage doppelganger sitting in our living room. The shock on his face was absolute, staring at Alexander like he was seeing a ghost of himself. But when Grace explained her story, Robert's expression shifted from confusion to rage. Ryan, he said, his voice deadly quiet. He knew I was in the hospital. He was supposed to be watching our apartment, feeding our cat. Instead, he was using my name to pick up women. The truth unraveled quickly after that. Ryan had spent those 3 weeks living as Robert, using his brother's identity while Robert lay unconscious. He'd accessed Robert's apartment, worn his clothes, even used his credit cards. We'd noticed strange charges later, but attributed them to identity theft during the chaos of the medical crisis. The real Robert had never met Grace, but his DNA match with Alexander was close enough to flag as parental because identical twins share virtually identical genetic profiles. The more precise testing we ordered confirmed Alexander's father was Robert's identical twin, showing the tiny variations that distinguished the brothers. Finding Ryan took 3 months of private investigators and legal procedures. He was living in Portland under another name, having reinvented himself as a successful real estate developer. When confronted with the DNA evidence and Grace's testimony, he initially denied everything, then tried to claim it had been consensual identity borrowing. The legal complexities were staggering. Alexander deserved to know his biological father, but that father had committed identity fraud to conceive him. Grace had been deceived about who she was sleeping with. Robert had been violated by his brother using his identity, and I'd spent 16 years in a marriage haunted by a ghost we didn't know existed. Ryan eventually agreed to meet Alexander under supervised conditions, but the relationship was strained by the circumstances of its origin. Alexander struggled to reconcile the father he'd imagined with the man who'd lied about his very identity to sleep with his mother. Grace pursued legal action for fraud, but settled out of court, with Ryan establishing a college fund for Alexander. The aftermath destroyed what remained of the brothers' relationship permanently. Robert couldn't forgive the violation of using his comatose state to steal his identity. Ryan insisted it had been harmless fun that got out of hand, refusing to acknowledge the devastation he'd caused to multiple lives. His sociopathic dismissal of the harm made any reconciliation impossible. Today, Alexander is in college, maintaining limited contact with Ryan while building a genuine relationship with Robert, the uncle who's become more of a father figure than his biological parents. Grace and I have developed an unexpected friendship, bonded by our shared deception by the same man wearing different faces. Sometimes DNA doesn't lie, but it doesn't always tell the complete truth either. Identical twins might share genetic codes, but they don't share character, and the man who'd fathered Alexander had proven he possessed neither integrity nor identity of his own.